We took this nasty, overgrown green swamp and turned it into a beautiful, clear water oasis. Come check out this project in Green Valley, Missouri. Today we're out near Green Valley, Missouri, working on an extreme makeover project for the Kuntz family. When we showed up day one on this project, it was pretty incredible. And I don't mean incredible in a good way. This place looked like something straight out of South Louisiana. Swampy looking, nasty looking waters, and no telling what was in there.
Oh, yeah, that looks like you're enjoying. Oh.
Whenever we got started with this one, beauty was a little bit hard to find. This pond was completely unapproachable. All the land surrounding this pond was trying to get in. All of the vegetation was growing not only around the banks, but off into the pond, and so that you could literally not access the pond at any point. All of the trees, all of the banks, every part of this pond was sloping in towards the middle. The water itself was green. It had about an inch thick film of algae blooms and other types of vegetation decaying material on it, so you couldn't get in there anywhere to even cast the line.
Salli and Rusty are moving into a brand new development here, just raw property everywhere, brand new road. To bring a little bit of perspective to this project, if you look at the neighborhood as a whole, look at the houses getting built, the properties there. This is a very upscale neighborhood with upscale houses, and having kind of a cruddy pond on it just doesn't fit with the feeling that this place is supposed to be bringing. With this pond, a huge part of why it's just such a big issue is the fact that it doesn't align with their vision for the property. As you drive through this neighborhood, you see a couple of houses getting built that are just absolutely beautiful. You see the neighbor across the road, they have a beautiful, restored, amazing pond. With them, they're building a brand new house, a brand new shop, really making this property their own, their retirement, their lifelong vision, all ties into this property. And with the pond being surrounded by trees, overgrown with algae, 6 feet of just nasty muck in the bottom, none of that lined up with their vision. After connecting with Salli and Rusty to go over their budget, their story, their vision, and all their issues with this pond, we scheduled a site evaluation. And what that is, we get into it in a lot more depth in other videos, but just briefly, visit on site with you to gather all the details necessary to come up with a plan, give you a proposal, and say, hey, here's what we're gonna do, here's how much it's gonna cost, and here's all the data behind why we made these decisions. There's a plethora of different tests that we can perform based on site's very specific criteria. But on this one, just a couple that we did is a visual inspection on what was happening with the pond, what were the depths of the muck, what was the dam condition like, and then also a LiDAR inspection to give us a real-time 3D model of exactly how the property looks and all the different elevations. Again, I can't stress it enough, depending on site conditions, depending on the project and client requirements, there is an incredibly vast amount of testing that happens on a project to make sure we're equipped with the right data to give you an accurate design and proposal for your project. Just as a disclaimer, don't use this video as a step-by-step guide for renovating your pond.
I declare bankruptcy!
There are so many things that go into how a pond is built and how to ensure they hold water after a renovation. So going into it blind without the knowledge is not the best option. We have many other videos that go into all that and many more to come to go over what specifically each one is and why we do it. Very first thing is we needed the space around the pond. So we went through, ripped out all the trees around the pond, and then processed them and burned all the scraps. Trees are one of those very touchy subjects that we try to have a very large amount of respect towards. The biggest thing being, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. So now that we're coming onto a property and there's oftentimes these very mature trees, we have to be very selective about which ones we pull out. So looking at a pond, we can't leave trees on the dam, we can't leave trees in certain areas, but at the same time, we're trying to manage where trees are left to create this park-like feeling that most people absolutely love with their ponds. The biggest reason we don't leave trees on, let's say, the dam, for instance, is because of their root systems and how they can affect the structural integrity of the dam. There's a couple ways to mitigate that and actually leave trees on the dam, but it's costly and it's very rare that we do them. A couple things you have to keep in mind when keeping trees around a pond isn't just the feeling that you're going to get, this park-like feeling where there's a few very manicured trees throughout a large area. It's also what happens when those trees blow stuff down on the ground. In the wintertime, they lose the leaves. Where do those go? Oftentimes right into the pond. So that's gonna add to muck accumulation. Then you got limbs and sticks that fall in the pond that you get snagged on. You can't cast a fishing line over top. There's a couple things you have to keep in mind as far as placing trees, or keeping trees rather, and how you're going to be using the space later on. Sometimes, hey, trees are very important to the type of pond you're building. Sometimes we'll go in, like for instance right now we're building a lake, and there is trees specifically left in one portion of the pond. It's not near the dam, but it's more so toward the inlet. And what we're doing there is creating a lot of fish habitat, almost like a wetland. Over time, these trees are going to die. They're going to drop their leaves, leave their stumps, leave a bunch of rubble in that area. And it's going to create an amazing spawning ground for all these fish, specifically for the trophy fishing lake we're building. During a muck out, we've got to drain the pond. It's just one of those unfortunate side effects that we have to do to actually go through there and create a brand new environment that's going to have a much more different set of life to it. Whenever we drain it down, what happens to all the life in there? Well, first of all, most of the turtles, believe it or not, run out pretty much immediately. They're like, hey, where'd my water go? And they get the idea pretty quickly that something is gonna happen in that pond.
During the muck out of this pond, it was dubbed the turtle pond. Because it was snapping turtle after snapping turtle after snapping turtle. And that's very common with all these ponds that are extremely silted in with a lot of vegetation grown over the top. There's not gonna be a lot of fish in there, but there are gonna be a ton of turtles and all their little frog buddies too.
All the fish that are in there, oftentimes that just becomes food for the wildlife. We have a couple options to save your fish, such as building ponds nearby or relocating them to another pond that we would absolutely love to do, but oftentimes that stuff can get pretty costly and it's just not in the values of the customer. You might be wondering, hey, if a pond's full of water, how does draining it not affect the people downstream, or what happens to the people downstream? Well, there's a very long process. Again, one of the tests we run, one of the analysis we run to understand what's gonna happen downstream when we let this water flood. And it also affects how we're going to let it flood. Are we going to cut the dam, just let it all drain out in a controlled manner? Or are we going to also pump it out? Are we going to siphon it out? What options do we have for pumping, and how is that going to affect the cost?
Just about got all the water drained out of here. Then we'll take our dozer, push all the mud and muck over here to our trench, push it down the trench, build up our berm down there at the end to catch all of it so we don't push it downstream. And we'll lay it all out right in there to let it dry. Stay tuned.
Moving on to the muck removal. This is the exciting yet not so exciting part. Reason being, well, hey, we're gonna start cleaning out the pond, making this thing look absolutely amazing, but we're dealing with mud, and the mud gets everywhere. It doesn't smell the best at first, but not to worry. At some point, usually about a week or two later, when it crusts over, you won't smell a thing. With the muck though, the biggest question we always get is how much is in the pond? Well, oftentimes we're gonna go through and probe the pond, figure out how much is in there, but at the end of the day, sometimes there are pits of muck in a pond.
Let's try and get over there.
We've ran into situations where there's 20 feet of muck in a pond, where they have these deep kind of initial pits dug as they're built. And then we also have ran into situations where there's only a foot or two of muck in the pond. A lot of it comes down to what's been feeding the pond, how old is it, and what kind of runoff has it seen throughout all the years. Again, muck accumulation, understanding how much is in a pond or a lake before dredging or muck outs. It's part of that bid process to make sure we're designing something and bidding on something that's actually possible and has an understood budget. So since we're pulling mud out of a pond, obviously mud is wet, and that mud stays wet for an incredibly long time. In fact, you probably can't even fathom how long it's going to stay wet, and it depends on how thick we build it. We take a 1 acre pond that's 4 feet deep with muck, and we spread it out over 8 acres. So you have 6 inches of muck over 8 acres. That's going to dry out a lot faster than taking 1 acre of mud that's 4 feet deep and then putting that in some place that's a ½ acre and making it 8 feet deep. So the thickness of where we spread out the mud obviously affects the cost and equally affects how fast it dries. But if you spread it out real thin, you can kind of expect it to dry out in a couple weeks. As if you spread it out 8 feet deep, you might expect it to dry out within 15 or 20 years at the bottom. Obviously the top still crusts over at the same amount, but the deeper mud just doesn't. On a pond like this, one thing to keep in mind is just the scale of it. A lot of people just can't fathom the actual scale. On this one in particular, there was over 5,000 tons of muck that we had to pull out of it.
That's gross.
Yeah. A huge part of why ponds silt in over time is, hey, where we're at here, most of the ponds are built in areas where there was not a naturally formed pond. And what that means is that, hey, it's going to silt in over time. With ponds silting in, essentially that just means that the runoff, leaves, all this stuff, even like algae in a pond or plant aquatic life, all the dead things that die in it, all that's going to accumulate in the bottom. Yes, microbes eat them up over time, but sometimes they just can't keep up, especially with, let's say, farm field runoff or row crop operations. Depending on what kind of issues you have with your pond, a lot of it is derived from the muck accumulation making a pond shallower. There's a huge misconception about ponds and how they fit into an environment. You really have to remember, ponds, most of them that you see, I mean, unless you're really in the mountains or in like the Everglades, let's say, are not natural. It is a man-made thing that people build to control runoff and add to the aesthetic appeal of their property. So with that comes maintenance. With anything man-made, obviously comes maintenance. Now, why do we maintain ponds? A lot of it comes down to what do they visually look like and what are they doing to the life in them. At a start of a pond, you might build it 15 feet deep. It might be this beautiful trophy fishing bass pond. Over time, let's say 30, 40, 50 years, over time, that pond gets shallower and shallower, the bass gets smaller and smaller, the bait fish go away until eventually it's so shallow, nothing can really live in it anymore because it's just a swamp or wetland. Now, with that, it does create a whole new life form. But for many people, there was a reason there was a pond there, and there's a vision they have for that pond. So having a wetland as a pond opposed to an actual pond as a pond is why we go through and do all these renovations. On a project like this one here, what we ended up doing was getting it out of the pond dam as fast as possible and shoving it to the back. Now, whenever we shove it to the back, it kind of flows in its own way and does its own thing, often doesn't contour the land too beautifully. It's gonna be lumpy, it's gonna have weird spots to it. And with Salli and Rusty specifically, is we're coming back about a year later to then go through and regrade it out in the area to reshape it, make sure it contours the land naturally. With this muck out here, the idea was, hey, we're gonna throw it to the back side of the dam, let it dry out there. That's often the most economical and easiest way to muck out a pond. There are a few other options. The first one is dewatering the muck, so that pretty much means
Pumping it out of the pond rather than scooping it. It's a big
After the muck out's done, on this specific project, what happens is you go through and finish grade everything and lay the rock in around the pond. Make that pond look beautiful. Now, you may notice in the footage what happened is we laid the rock in after the pond filled up. So how long did it take for this pond to fill up, and why did we do it afterwards? Well, first of all, the rock was kind of an afterthought, but it absolutely added to the enhanced beauty of that pond. It was just an amazing decision on their part. And then as far as filling it up, it only took them about a year. We had an amazing year there. The pond was in a perfect spot, exactly where the runoff should have been. Now, the installation of the rock is very specific, and there's a reason why we do it in the steps required. So essentially, the first one is we regrade everything around the pond, make sure that rock is a very nice, stable place to go. After that, we lay down a geotextile fabric, and the purpose of that is to support the rock and make sure that rock doesn't down into the actual mud. If that starts to happen over time, your rock's gonna disappear. It's gonna get eroded with the rest of the bank. The fabric in there plays a few roles, and it's incredibly important in making sure a quality install is done. The last thing was bringing in all that rock. There was a few hundred tons of rock brought in to line this. I mean, multiple semi-truckloads. There's a lot of rock, a lot of heavy equipment to move that rock and place it around the pond. The last thing was tamping the rock. So without tamping the rock, that rock's gonna move around. We'll get into rock installations in a whole new video. Don't wanna get too far into it, but tamping the rock makes it where all those rocks and their jagged corners lock in together. It creates a very nice border. Now, there's a few other ways to line a pond. Not only is there that riprap option, but you can also do like precast concrete blocks, like those very large concrete placed blocks that have all sorts of decorative fronts that you can put on there. Then we have limestone blocks, which are these Kansas quarried limestone blocks. They're very, very beautiful, and it just creates a very seamless border. And we'll go into that in that different video because that's super big. One of my favorite parts about this project was being able to see a pond go from that swamp, mucky pond to being something that is going to be the highlight of the neighborhood. If you're wondering how much time you should budget for a project like this, a very good safe option is anywhere in that 3 to 6 week range. If you love this video and if you love these ponds just as much as we do, or you're wanting to build one for your very own, you're wanting to make this huge shift on your property, add this asset to your property that's going to just incredibly enhance the quality of the life that you get from it, reach out to us. We service so many states across the US, and you can find all of the info about us, even some pricing on our website at bulletproofpondandlake.com.